My wife had an affair with my own brother, and my kids helped them keep it hidden for 2 years as if it were some family secret I had no right to know. When I finally uncovered the truth, I sold everything I owned, disappeared to the other side of the country, and what I did next completely destroyed the perfect little fantasy they had built together. So buckle up, Reddit, because this is a long story. I'm writing this from a small cabin in Montana, nearly 1,800 miles away from the life I walked away from 6 months ago. Tomorrow morning, my ex-wife will wake up in her tiny studio apartment to an eviction notice. My brother will step outside only to find his truck has been repossessed. And my kids, they'll finally realize their dad wasn't nearly as blind or as foolish as they believed. I know some of you are probably thinking this sounds like another revenge fantasy. Honestly, I wish it were. I wish I could shut this laptop, go back home, and pretend none of this ever happened. But life has a cruel way of forcing your hand when the people you love the most decide to betray you in ways you never thought possible. So here's how a blue-collar kid from Detroit built a successful business, only to watch his own family try to steal everything he'd worked his entire life to create. For the record, they picked the wrong man to betray. My name is Jake. I'm 41 years old, and I grew up dirt poor in Detroit. My dad spent years working on the Ford assembly line until his back finally gave out when I was 15. My mom cleaned office buildings at night just to keep food on the table. Not exactly the American dream. At 16, I started working in commercial plumbing. It was supposed to be nothing more than a summer job, but I ended up falling in love with the trade. By 22, I'd earned my master plumber's license. 3 years later, with $5,000 borrowed from my dad's retirement savings, I started my own commercial plumbing and HVAC company. Back then, I honestly believed hard work could build the future I wanted. I met Sarah at a plumbing trade show in 2001. She was 23, fresh out of college, working in sales for a plumbing supply company. She was blonde, petite, and had this incredible ability to make you feel like you were the only person in the room whenever she wanted something from you. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. Looking back, that was mistake number 1. I convinced myself her expensive tastes would settle down once we got married. They never did. After our son Marcus was born in 2005, Sarah never went back to work. She said she wanted to stay home and be a full-time mom. Looking back now, I realize she simply preferred spending the money I worked so hard to earn. Designer clothes, luxury cars, country club memberships. Every new trend became another excuse to spend more. Meanwhile, I was working 70-hour weeks because I honestly believed that's what a good husband was supposed to do. I was young, I was proud, and, if I'm being honest, I was naive. By 2010, my company was bringing in around $2 million a year. We had 27 employees, owned all of our equipment outright, and I just bought Sarah the dream house she'd always wanted. A beautiful 4,200 square foot colonial home in the suburbs that cost us $680,000. That same year, our daughter Emma was born. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Then I made the second biggest mistake of my life. I hired my younger brother David as my operations manager. David was 38, 3 years younger than me, and he'd spent most of his adult life bouncing from one failed job to another. He was charming, confident, and could talk his way into almost anything, but every time something went wrong, somehow it was always someone else's fault. He'd lose a sales job because his manager was supposedly jealous of him. He'd get fired from a construction company because they didn't appreciate his ideas. Nothing was ever his responsibility. Still, I felt sorry for him. Growing up, our parents constantly compared him to me. Mom would always say things like, "Why can't you be more like your brother Jake?" Or, "Jake never gave us this kind of trouble." I honestly believed that if I gave David a real opportunity, maybe he'd finally get his life together. The irony still makes me laugh. I was so focused on being the supportive older brother that I completely ignored every warning sign. To be fair, David was excellent with clients. He could walk into a room and have people trusting him within minutes. Customers loved him. The problem was that he hated actual work. He'd disappear for hours claiming he was chasing new leads or meeting potential clients while I handled all the difficult technical work that kept the company running. I built the business. He enjoyed the credit. His wife, Lisa, was a kind, hardworking woman who deserved much better than she got. They had 2 young children, and I convinced myself I was helping my family by giving David stability. For 8 years, I carried that business while David happily accepted praise for deals he never could have delivered without me. At home, things weren't much different. Sarah spent money faster than I could earn it. My kids slowly grew up believing their dad was nothing more than a walking ATM. And I kept telling myself this was what success looked like. I was providing for my family. I was building something that would last. I thought all the sacrifices were worth it. Then, about 2 years ago, everything began falling apart. Or, to be more accurate, that was when the people I loved most decided to stab me in the back while I was working myself to exhaustion to give them the life they wanted. If you'd like, I can continue rewriting the next section in exactly the same natural, cinematic style while preserving every story beat. The first sign that something was wrong seemed harmless enough. Sarah joined an upscale yoga studio. It cost nearly $200 a month just for hot yoga and meditation classes. Then came the shopping. Suddenly everything had to be Lululemon. $70 sports bras. $130 leggings. Even her yoga mat cost more than my work boots. She kept saying she was finding herself. How original. A 40-year-old suburban mom having a spiritual awakening. You hear that story all the time. Before long, the yoga studio became her second home. She had morning classes, evening sessions, and weekend retreats. Every time she came home, she'd talk about how peaceful she felt, how much she'd grown as a person, and how she was finally living authentically. She started doing expensive cleanse diets, buying organic food for everything, and filling the house with self-help books about breaking free from limiting beliefs. Looking back, I should have paid a lot more attention to that last part. Around the same time, David started stopping by the house more often while I was out working job sites. Whenever I asked about it, Sarah always had an innocent explanation. Oh, David came by around lunch. We were just discussing the Henderson project. Or, your brother stopped in earlier. He just wanted to make sure the kids and I were doing okay since you've been working so much. There was always a reason. Every visit sounded completely harmless. Meanwhile, I was working 12-hour days trying to keep up with customer demand, so I actually appreciated the fact that David seemed to be looking after my family. Looking back, I was a complete fool. The kids started acting differently too. Marcus, who was 17 by then, always seemed nervous whenever I came home unexpectedly. Emma, now 14, spent more and more time hiding in her room. Family dinners became awkward. It felt like everyone was carefully choosing their words, as if they were all walking on eggshells around me. Then Sarah's spending went completely out of control. First came a brand new BMW X5 that cost around $65,000 because, according to her, the 3-year-old Mercedes she'd been driving wasn't reliable anymore. Never mind the fact that it had barely 35,000 miles on it and had never once broken down. Next, she decided our kitchen needed a complete renovation. $45,000 for granite countertops and custom cabinets because our perfectly good kitchen was suddenly dated and embarrassing whenever friends came over. Then came the endless shopping. Every month there were new designer handbags that cost more than some people's mortgage payments. Shoes she'd wear once before stuffing them into the closet. Jewelry bought for special occasions that either never happened or somehow never included me. Weekend spa trips with her sister slowly turned into week-long luxury resort vacations. The credit card bills became unbelievable. $8,000 at Nordstrom one month, $12,000 the next, spread across Saks, Neiman Marcus, and boutiques I'd never even heard of. Whenever I questioned the spending, she'd immediately explode. I gave up my career for this family. I could have been somebody if I hadn't sacrificed everything to raise your children and support your dreams. The funny part was that her career had been an entry-level sales job at a plumbing supply company. The way she talked, you'd think she'd walked away from being the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I deserve nice things. All my friends have nice things. You're being controlling. You're so cheap. Every argument followed the exact same pattern. I'd ask a simple question about where all the money was going. she'd turn it into a personal attack. I'd end up apologizing, and she'd still get everything she wanted, plus a little extra because apparently I'd caused her emotional distress by daring to question her spending. Somehow, I always ended up being the bad guy. David changed too. He kept telling me I was working too hard and needed to enjoy life more. He suggested I take more vacations and let him handle more of the company's daily operations. Looking back, it's obvious why he wanted that. His wife, Lisa, also started acting strangely whenever Sarah was around. She seemed uncomfortable at family gatherings, but I dismissed it as normal tension between sisters-in-law. I never imagined she might have sensed something I couldn't see. Then there was my marriage. The intimacy slowly disappeared. Sarah always had an excuse. She was tired. She was stressed. Her hormones were changing. Yet somehow she looked better than she had in years. She worked out 6 days a week, got regular facials, dressed better than ever, and always looked like she was trying to impress someone. At the time, I convinced myself she was simply taking better care of herself. Now I know exactly who she was trying to impress. Instead of questioning any of it, I buried myself even deeper in work. I figured that if I could just grow the business a little more and make a little more money, everything at home would eventually fall back into place. So I expanded. I added an electrical division, bought 3 new service trucks, hired 8 more technicians. By 2022, annual revenue had climbed to $8 million. None of it mattered. The more successful I became, the farther away my family drifted. Looking back now, it's almost as if they were quietly preparing for a future that didn't include me. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. Emma asked if she could borrow my iPad for a school project because hers was charging. Later that afternoon, I went into her room to grab it from her desk. While I was looking, I accidentally knocked over a stack of textbooks. Hidden behind them was an old Android phone I'd never seen before. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up. To my surprise, it wasn't locked. The recent messages made it obvious that the phone belonged to Sarah. It was her burner phone, the one she'd been using to communicate with David. What I found on that phone destroyed 20 years of marriage and 8 years of trust in my own brother. They weren't just having an affair. They had been planning my complete destruction. The phone contained 2 full years of conversations between Sarah and David. Message after message about how I was holding them back, how they deserved to be together, and what they were going to do once I was finally out of the picture. The more I read, the worse it got. Message after message mocked me for being a workaholic. David kept telling Sarah that I'd never suspect anything because I was too trusting. Sarah called me that stubborn plumber over and over again. She said I was too stupid to notice what was happening right under my nose and too boring to keep any woman interested for long. David had his own nickname for me, the money machine. According to him, I was useful for only one thing, working myself to death so they could enjoy the lifestyle I paid for. They honestly believed I was too blind to realize I was being used. One conversation hit harder than all the others. It was from last Christmas. On Christmas Eve, I had been out answering an emergency service call at a nursing home. A burst pipe had left the building without heat, and if it wasn't repaired quickly, elderly residents could have been left freezing in the middle of winter. I spent hours crawling through freezing crawl spaces on my hands and knees, doing everything I could to make sure those people stayed warm. While I was out there working, Sarah and David were texting each other about how pathetic I was. They joked that I cared more about work than my family and said I deserved to end up alone. I was literally freezing outside trying to keep elderly people safe, and they were laughing at me for it. Then I opened the photos. Those hurt even more. Pictures of Sarah wearing lingerie I'd never seen before. Photos of David sitting in my office after hours. And then, pictures of the 2 of them together in my own bed. The same bed I'd paid for with 16-hour workdays, sore muscles and bloodied hands. But somehow, even that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering that my own children knew everything. Marcus had been helping cover up the affair by deleting security footage from our home surveillance system whenever David came over during work hours. I had installed that security system to protect my family. Instead, my own son was using it to help betray me. Emma played her part too. She constantly made up believable stories whenever I asked where Sarah was. Mom's at book club. Mom went shopping with Aunt Linda. Mom's having coffee with Mrs. Henderson. Every excuse sounded innocent. Every lie came with the sweet smile of a 14-year-old girl who should have been worrying about homework and school dances, not helping hide her mother's affair. Then I found something that made my stomach turn. They had a private group chat. Sarah, David, Marcus, Emma, the four of them. They even had code names for everything. I was simply the boss. David was Uncle D. Their secret meetings were called study sessions. Whenever I traveled for work, they'd call it a golden opportunity. And every time I worked late, they'd celebrate another free pass. But the messages from my kids hurt even more than the ones between Sarah and David. Marcus would text, "Is the coast clear?" Whenever I called to say I'd be home late, Emma would immediately send a message saying, "All clear. He's working late again." My own children had become accomplices in my wife's affair with my brother. Take a second and really think about that. These were the same kids I'd taught to ride bikes. The same kids I'd helped with homework. The same kids I'd taken to baseball games and dance recitals. I worked myself to exhaustion to give them every opportunity one never had. And they repaid me by helping destroy our family. The messages didn't stop there. Sarah shared private details about our marriage that had absolutely no business leaving our home. They made fun of my work clothes. They laughed about the stories I'd tell from job sites. Even my attempts to spend quality time together became jokes. Whenever I suggested a weekend family activity, they mocked me behind my back. One conversation from Father's Day last year nearly broke me. While I was outside grilling burgers, proud to be spending the day with what I believed was a loving family, they were texting each other about how fake the whole celebration felt. They were literally counting down the minutes until it would be over so they could get back to their real lives. Meanwhile, I stood there thinking I was one of the luckiest men alive. I stayed in Emma's room for nearly 2 hours, carefully taking screenshots of everything. Every message, every photo, bank account information they had been discussing. Even the timeline they'd created for pushing me out of my own life. Their plan was simple: drive me toward a mental breakdown, force me into a divorce, take half of everything I'd spent decades building. Then Sarah and David could finally be together out in the open. The very last screenshot I saved was a message Sarah had sent David just 3 days earlier. "Jake is getting suspicious about the expenses. We need to be more careful. Maybe it's time to make our move." That one message confirmed everything. They weren't just cheating on me. They were planning to destroy me financially, personally, and emotionally before taking everything I'd worked my entire life to build. When I finally stood up, my hands weren't shaking. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. Instead, I felt strangely calm. It was as if every confusing moment from the last 2 years had suddenly fallen into place. I carefully put the burner phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I walked downstairs. My family was sitting around the dinner table like it was any other evening. Sarah smiled at me. "How was your day?" David was sitting there drinking one of my sodas while joking about a customer who had tried to negotiate the price of a plumbing job. "People think plumbing is easy," he laughed. "They have no idea how much skill it actually takes." I looked him straight in the eyes. "No," I said calmly. "They really don't." Marcus asked if I could help him with his college applications that weekend. Emma wanted money for an upcoming school ski trip. Sarah smiled and told me she'd made reservations for the new steakhouse downtown on Saturday night. I smiled. I nodded. I acted exactly like the husband and father they'd expected. I agreed to plans I already knew I'd never keep, because while they thought they were fooling me, inside, I was already planning the complete destruction of every single person who had betrayed me. That night, I began working on the most important project of my entire life. The careful, systematic downfall of everyone who had turned my own family into a lie. If you'd like, I can keep rewriting the remaining sections in this exact same style so the entire story reads consistently from beginning to end. I'd be careful. The first step was gathering evidence. I couldn't let any of them realize I knew the truth, so I had to be patient and methodical. Over the next month, I documented absolutely everything. Whenever I had access to Sarah's burner phone, I used my work phone to photograph every message, every photo, and every conversation. After I noticed David snooping through my files, I secretly installed a hidden camera in my home office. It didn't take long to catch him. The camera showed him going through confidential financial records and taking pictures of client contracts. I also built a detailed timeline of their affair using credit card statements, GPS records, and security footage they had forgotten about. The videos were especially damning. David's truck showed up in my driveway at all kinds of strange hours. I'd watch him walk through the back door like he owned the place. Sarah would greet him wearing clothes she'd always change out of before I got home from work. The more evidence I collected, the more I realized just how careless they'd become. Sarah practically handed me proof. She booked hotel rooms using our joint credit card, claiming they were girls' weekends, even though the reservations were always for a single guest. Every hotel stay happened on the exact same days David conveniently took personal time off from work. She even charged lingerie to our account. Lingerie I never once saw her wear. She bought expensive gifts for David and disguised them on the credit card statements as family presents. One purchase in particular made my blood boil. A $300 silk tie she bought him for Boss's Day. Apparently, I was paying for gifts celebrating my own brother taking over my place in more ways than one. They honestly thought I was too stupid to read a credit card statement. The same woman who used to brag that I was a financial genius for building a multi-million-dollar company somehow believed I couldn't do basic math. David wasn't any smarter. He used company vehicles to meet Sarah, forgetting every truck had GPS tracking installed. I knew exactly where those trucks went, how long they stayed there, and when they returned. He even charged romantic dinners to his company credit card. Those dinners always happened on the same night Sarah claimed she was at book club, yoga workshops, or spending time with friends. He spent hours making personal phone calls during work, completely forgetting our office phone system automatically logged and recorded them. Then I found something that honestly made me laugh. He'd been writing love letters to Sarah on my company letterhead. I discovered copies sitting in his desk one Saturday morning when I came into the office early. Love letters, written on stationery my company paid for, using office supplies I'd purchased. During hours I was paying him to work. But none of that hurt as much as documenting my children's involvement. Marcus had been deleting security footage for nearly 18 months. What he didn't know was that our system automatically backed everything up to the cloud. I recovered almost every deleted file. Emma had her own role. She created fake social media posts to give Sarah believable alibis. She'd repost old photos from months earlier and make them look current, making it appear Sarah was attending events she was never actually at. In reality, she was with David. Somewhere along the way, my son had learned how to lie like a professional. My 14-year-old daughter had become an expert at manipulation. Their mother had turned them into willing participants in her deception. The next step was protecting everything I'd built. Contrary to what people think, I couldn't simply disappear overnight like some internet revenge story. I had employees depending on me, active contracts, legal obligations, people whose livelihoods depended on my business. So instead of running, I quietly prepared. I met with 3 different attorneys to understand every legal option available to me. That's when I learned that, in my state, adultery still carried legal weight, especially when it involved financial fraud and a close family member. The evidence I'd collected wasn't just proof of an affair. It showed planning, conspiracy, financial misconduct. I formed a brand new LLC in Wyoming that had no connection to my existing company. Little by little, I began moving my personal assets into that new business. I privately sold my classic Mustang and my motorcycle, then deposited the money into a brand new account at another bank. I also liquidated several investments. When Sarah happened to notice, I casually told her I was diversifying my portfolio. She barely cared. By then, she'd stopped paying attention to our finances years earlier. The only thing that interested her was whether her credit cards kept working and whether she could continue spending without limits. As long as that happened, she never questioned where the money came from. The third step was preparing my business. I couldn't simply fire David. On paper, he wasn't a regular employee. He functioned more like a partner, so I needed solid documentation before removing him. I promoted 2 of my most trusted senior technicians into operations management positions. I gave them more responsibility, better salaries, and future equity opportunities. Then I reorganized every major system inside the company so the business could operate smoothly without David. At the same time, I documented every mistake he made, every important client meeting he skipped, every time he disappeared for hours, every technical problem he couldn't solve, every promise he made to customers without asking me first. The deeper I looked, the more I uncovered. David had been quietly skimming money from the company. The amounts weren't huge, but they were consistent. He used company credit cards for personal purchases, submitted fake business meal expenses, even billed repairs for his personal vehicle to the company. I didn't confront him. I let him keep doing it, because every fraudulent charge became one more piece of evidence. The 4th step was easily the hardest. I had to pretend everything was perfectly normal while the people I loved continued planning my destruction. For the next 2 months, I lived a double life. During the day, I was Jake, the successful business owner, the dependable husband, the devoted father. At night, I became a man quietly preparing for war. The more I watched Sarah, the bolder she became. She'd come home from yoga with messy hair and suspicious marks on her neck that she never bothered to explain. Expensive gifts started appearing out of nowhere: designer handbags, jewelry, perfume, and luxury accessories. Whenever I asked, she'd casually say they were gifts from her sister or something she'd bought during a girls' weekend. The receipts told a different story. David had paid for every single one of them. As time went on, Sarah became even more demanding. Nothing we owned was ever good enough anymore. She constantly complained that our house looked outdated compared to her friends' homes. She wanted another complete kitchen renovation, this one costing nearly $90,000. Then she started insisting we needed a vacation home in Colorado because, according to her, successful people own multiple properties. The moment I suggested we should slow down and be a little more careful with our spending, she completely lost it. "I didn't marry you just to live like we're poor," she snapped. "I could have married anyone." I looked at her. Anyone? She didn't hesitate. Men with real money were interested in me. Investment bankers, doctors, lawyers. I settled for a tradesman because I thought you'd eventually become something more. A tradesman, after everything I'd built, after creating a multimillion-dollar business from scratch, after buying her every luxury she'd ever wanted, after working myself nearly to death to give her the life she dreamed of. I was still just a tradesman in her eyes. That conversation told me everything I needed to know. David's attitude changed too. He stopped pretending to respect me. He began criticizing the way I ran the business, saying my methods were outdated and that I was holding everyone back. He wanted us to expand faster, take on massive debt, and hire cheaper workers to increase profits. His ideas would have bankrupted the company within 2 years. Then he started acting like he already owned the place. "Jake, can you handle the Johnson job? I've got meetings all afternoon." "Jake, could you stay late and finish inventory? I promised Lisa I'd be home for dinner." Except I already knew where those meetings really were. And those dinners with Lisa? They weren't with Lisa at all. They were with Sarah. The GPS tracking on our company vehicles confirmed everything. Around the same time, Marcus started pushing harder about college. "Dad, I need you to co-sign my student loans. Tuition is $28,000 a year." What he didn't know was that I'd already discovered he'd been accepted to 3 different colleges. He'd been discussing every decision with David behind my back instead of me. Emma changed too, in ways that honestly broke my heart. One day she looked at me and said, "Daddy, Mom says you've been really stressed about money. Maybe you should retire early and let Uncle David run the business." She was only 14 years old, and she was encouraging her own father to hand over everything he'd spent a lifetime building. The final straw came about 6 weeks ago. I left a job site early because of equipment problems and drove home. As soon as I pulled into the driveway, I saw David's truck. He hadn't even tried to hide it. It was parked right in front of the house like he belonged there. I stayed in my truck for about 10 minutes, listening to music and answering emails. Part of me wanted to give them enough time to realize I was home. When I finally walked inside, I found David sitting comfortably at my kitchen table, drinking coffee with Sarah while Emma quietly worked on homework nearby. "Hey bro," David said with a smile. "Just stopped by to check on Sarah and the kids. You know how Lisa worries when I'm working late." Sarah was wearing a silk robe. It was 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. Her hair was still wet from a shower. She looked me right in the eyes, smiled and said, "Honey, you're home early. Everything okay?" The audacity was unbelievable. They were so convinced I was clueless that they didn't even bother creating a believable excuse anymore. "Just some equipment problems," I replied calmly. "Nothing major." "Good," David said as he stood up. "Well, I should get going." Then he turned to Sarah. "Thanks for the coffee. And don't worry about what we talked about. Everything will work out." Before leaving, he hugged me. He actually hugged me. As he walked out the door, I noticed something. His wedding ring was sitting in his pants pocket. Sarah's lipstick was slightly smeared. Emma looked up from her homework and smiled. "How was work today, Daddy?" That was the moment I made my final decision. This wasn't just an affair anymore. They weren't simply betraying me. They were insulting my intelligence every single day. My own brother believed I was too trusting, too stupid, and too pathetic to ever figure out what was happening. It was time to prove every one of them wrong. The following week, I finally put my plan into motion. Running a technical business had taught me one important lesson. Everything depends on timing. One mistake can ruin an entire project. Destroying the people who betrayed me required that same level of precision. Phase 1 was financial devastation. For months, I'd quietly moved my real assets out of our joint accounts and into protected entities. Sarah never noticed because I kept the checking account looking exactly the same. The difference was that our actual savings had been replaced with borrowed money. I opened a business line of credit using company assets as collateral. I used that borrowed money to continue funding Sarah's endless spending while my real assets were moved somewhere she couldn't touch them. Then, on Monday morning, I closed every joint bank account and every shared credit card. Sarah found out the hard way. Her card was declined while shopping at Nordstrom. A few minutes later, my phone rang. She was furious. "What the heck did you do to our accounts?" she screamed. I stayed perfectly calm. "I consolidated everything to get better banking rates," I said smoothly. It was a lie, but she believed it. "The new cards should arrive on Wednesday," I told her. Of course, Wednesday came and went, and no new cards ever showed up. I had never ordered them. That brought me to phase 2 of my plan. David. On Tuesday morning, I called an emergency meeting with my attorney and accountant. I laid out every piece of evidence I'd collected. His embezzlement, the misuse of company resources, the fraudulent expenses, everything. By the end of the meeting, they had prepared his termination paperwork along with a formal demand that he repay every dollar he'd stolen from the company. Wednesday morning, David arrived at the office expecting another normal workday. Instead, his security codes no longer worked. His office had already been cleared out. A security guard was waiting to escort him off the property. Outside, a repossession company was hooking his company truck to a tow truck. My phone rang over and over. 17 missed calls. I finally answered the 18th. "What the heck, Jake?" he yelled. "You can't just throw me out. We're family." I stayed calm. Family doesn't steal from each other. "What are you talking about?" "Read your termination letter. It documents over $47,000 in embezzled funds and misuse of company property." "You can't prove any of that." "I can prove every bit of it," I replied. "I have receipts, photographs, credit card records, GPS logs from the company vehicles, and plenty of other documentation." I paused before adding one more sentence. "Would you rather I send copies to Lisa? Or do you want to explain to your wife yourself that you've been stealing from your brother to finance an affair with his wife?" Silence. Complete silence. Finally, David whispered, "You're insane." "No," I answered. "I'm thorough." Then I added one last thing before ending the call. "Oh, And you may want to hire a good accountant. The IRS will probably be contacting you about some unreported income. Then I hung up. Phase 3 was about consequences. Marcus's college fund had always been under my name. For 12 years, I'd been contributing to a $529 education plan for him. That Wednesday afternoon, I liquidated the entire account and transferred every dollar into my protected LLC. $180,000 disappeared in a single transaction. Emma's car fund met the same fate. She had been expecting a brand new BMW for her 16th birthday the following month. Instead, that $45,000 became startup capital for my next business venture. Thursday morning, I canceled both kids' cell phone plans. I removed them from my health insurance. Then I shut down the credit card accounts they used for gas, food, and other expenses. Marcus discovered it first. He tried to buy lunch at school, and his card was declined. Emma found out during third period when her phone suddenly lost service. Both of them immediately called Sarah in a panic. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Sarah was furious. "You're punishing the children because of our problems." "No," I said calmly. "I'm teaching them that actions have consequences. They're just kids. They chose to help you betray me. They deserve another chance. They chose their side," I replied. "Now they're learning what life looks like without my financial support." "You can't be serious." "I am. Marcus is 17. That's old enough to delete security footage and lie to his father. Emma is 14. That's old enough to create fake alibis for her mother's affair. If they were old enough to knowingly help deceive me, then they're old enough to face the consequences of those choices." She didn't have an answer. She simply hung up. About an hour later, I received a text from Marcus. "Dad, please call me. I need to explain." I never called him back. Phase 4 was Sarah's reality check. Friday morning was beautiful. I woke up early, made myself a cup of coffee, and left for work just like I had every other weekday. Sarah was still asleep, sleeping peacefully in the same bed where she'd slept with my brother while I worked endless hours to pay for the life she enjoyed. At exactly 9 o'clock that morning, while Sarah was at yoga, the moving company I had hired pulled into our driveway. Their instructions were simple. Pack every item that legally belonged to me. Furniture I'd purchased before the marriage. My tools, my electronics, my clothes, everything. I also had them remove every item I'd personally bought for the kids. Their bedroom furniture, their computers, gaming systems, sports equipment. If I'd purchased it, it left the house. The movers worked fast. By noon, the place looked almost empty. Anyone walking inside would have thought it had been robbed. When Sarah came home from yoga, she found empty rooms and a single note waiting on the kitchen counter. It simply read, "I know everything. Divorce papers will be served on Monday. Do not contact me directly. All future communication goes through our attorneys." My phone started ringing almost immediately. By then, I was already 200 miles away, driving toward a completely different life. That was 3 months ago. Today, I'm writing this from my cabin in Montana. I now specialize in high-end HVAC installations for luxury mountain homes. The work is demanding. The pay is excellent. And for the first time in years, nobody here knows anything about my past. My attorney handled the divorce from start to finish. With the mountain of evidence I'd gathered, there wasn't much for Sarah to fight. She received exactly what the law entitled her to. Nothing more, nothing less. Our house had to be sold to cover the debts she'd accumulated. Remember when I said I'd quietly replaced our savings with borrowed money? That decision mattered. After paying legal fees and settling those debts, Sarah walked away with roughly $15,000. David's life completely fell apart. Lisa divorced him the moment she learned about both the affair and the embezzlement. She moved back to her hometown with their children. The IRS investigation I had set in motion uncovered 3 years of tax evasion. He's now facing federal charges and owes more than $200,000 in taxes, penalties, and interest. He even tried starting his own plumbing company. It failed before it ever really began because his legal problems made it impossible for him to get bonded. The last I heard, he was working as a day laborer, earning about $15 an hour. As for my kids, they finally learned what life looks like when dad's money isn't there to solve every problem. Marcus had to take out massive student loans and settle for community college instead of attending the 4-year university he'd planned on. If you continue with the next section, I'll keep the exact same tone and style so the entire story reads like it was written by one professional author. Emma ended up taking a part-time job at a fast food restaurant just to pay for her own phone bill and buy her own clothes. But that's not even the most interesting part. About 2 weeks ago, my phone rang. Somehow, Sarah had managed to find my new number. I still have no idea how. My best guess is she hired a private investigator, probably with money she couldn't really afford to spend. The moment I answered, she started crying. "Jake, please, I need to talk to you." I almost hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. "You've got 5 minutes. I made a terrible mistake," she sobbed. "I don't know what happened to me. I think I was going through some kind of midlife crisis. I never meant for any of this to go on for 2 years. I know how it looks, but I do love you. I always loved you." She took a shaky breath. "David convinced me you didn't appreciate me. He kept telling me you were holding me back. I see now that he was just using me." Funny how quickly the tables can turn. "What do you want, Sarah?" I asked. "I want my family back. I want to come home." I actually laughed. Not a fake laugh. A real one. "Home to what?" I asked. "The house is gone. It was sold. The kids resent you for dragging them into your lies. I've built a new life nearly 1,800 miles away." "I'll move," she said desperately. "I'll go anywhere. I'll do anything. Please, Jake, I can't survive on my own." "You should have thought about that before you called me that stubborn plumber. In all those text messages you sent to my brother." Silence. A long, uncomfortable silence. Finally she whispered, You saw those?" "I saw everything, Sarah. Every message. Every photo. Every plan you made. You didn't just have an affair. You conspired with my own brother to destroy the life I spent decades building." "I was angry," she cried. "I didn't mean those things." "Yes, you did. You meant every single word. You married a tradesman believing you could turn him into something else. And when I didn't become the man you imagined, you decided to replace me with my own brother." She broke down crying again. "What about the kids?" she asked. "They need their father. The kids made their choice. They spent 2 years lying to my face while helping you destroy our family. Marcus is basically an adult now. He'll figure things out. And Emma." I paused. "Emma is going to learn what integrity means, even if she has to learn it the hard way." "Jake, please. I'm working at Target now. I can barely pay my rent. My friends won't even talk to me anymore. My own family thinks I'm disgusting. I have nothing." "Good," I said quietly. "Now you know exactly how I felt when I discovered my wife and my own brother had spent 2 years planning to take everything I'd ever built. I'll sign any prenup you want," she pleaded. "I'll give up every claim to your money. I just want one chance to make this right. There isn't anything left to fix. We were finished the day you decided to sleep with my brother in my own bed." "What am I supposed to do?" she asked through tears. "The same thing I did when I was 16 years old and had absolutely nothing. Work. Figure it out. Build something with your own hands instead of trying to steal what someone else spent a lifetime creating." Then I ended the call and blocked her number. 2 days later, Marcus called me from a phone number I didn't recognize. "Dad, please. Mom told me she talked to you. I know you hate us, but we're desperate." "I don't hate you, Marcus. Hate requires caring. What I feel is indifference." "I know I messed up," he said. "I know I shouldn't have helped Mom hide everything from you. I was scared. She told me if you found out, you'd divorce her and we'd lose everything. So instead," I replied, "you helped her destroy me before I even knew what was happening. That wasn't. I didn't understand everything. I honestly thought I was protecting our family. I was just a kid." I sighed. You were old enough to delete security footage. You were old enough to lie directly to my face. You were old enough to help your mother and my brother betray me." He didn't answer. After a long silence, he quietly said, "Dad, I can't afford college anymore. The student loans aren't enough. Emma's struggling because she has to work after school. Mom can barely pay the rent. That sounds like a personal problem. We're your family." "No. My family wouldn't spend 2 years plotting against me. My family wouldn't mock me behind my back. My family wouldn't help someone else steal everything I'd worked my whole life to build." "What do you want us to do?" he asked. "Beg? I don't want you to do anything. I want you to leave me alone. I want you to figure out your own lives. I'm not your safety net anymore." His voice turned cold. "Fine. But don't expect us to ever forgive you for abandoning us. I'm not the one who needs forgiveness." Then I hung up. Yesterday, Emma tried a different approach. She mailed a handwritten letter to my attorney, knowing every other way of contacting me had been blocked. Smart kid. She figured out the only path she still had. The letter was 2 full pages. Page after page of apologies, regret, and desperate pleas for another chance. She wrote that she had only been 12 years old when everything started and claimed she never fully understood what was really happening. She said that, at the time, she honestly believed she was helping her mom be happy because I was always working. At the end of the letter, she asked if I could at least help them find jobs or get back on their feet. I read that letter once. Then I read it again. And then a third time. When I finished, I walked over to the fireplace. Without saying a word, I tossed it into the flames and watched it slowly burn to ashes. Here's what most people don't understand about betrayal. It isn't just about the affair. It isn't just about the lies. It's about the complete lack of respect. Sarah didn't just sleep with my brother. She turned me into a fool inside my own home. She laughed at me behind my back while I worked myself into the ground to give our family everything they ever wanted. My children didn't simply keep a secret. They became active participants in humiliating their own father. They deleted evidence. They lied to my face. They covered for their mother every chance they got. Worst of all, every one of them believed I'd never find out. They thought I was too trusting, too naive, too stupid to see what was happening right in front of me. And even if I did, they believed I loved them too much to ever walk away. They were wrong. Wrong about every single part of it.